Welcome back to Face the Nation. As this year's midterm election campaign kicks into high gear, we wanted to sit down with the chairs of both the Republican and Democratic parties. And we begin our conversation with Tom Perez, chairman of the DNC. You got 58 days to go, a lot of work. Democrats need to pick up roughly about 24 seats or so to win a majority in the House. When we look at our CBS polling, it shows a blue wave is far from guaranteed.
Well, progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability, Margaret, and we're working our tails off everywhere. I feel excited because we're organizing everywhere. We're fielding great candidates everywhere. You see the energy out there. Democratic turnout in the primaries in 2018 has been up 84% from 2014. And so you see that out there. That's the enthusiasm. And people are enthusiastic because we're fighting for the issues they care about. People's health care is on the ballot. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Your health care is on the ballot. If you have a pre-existing condition, that's on the ballot. Good wages are on the ballot. Education's on the ballot. And frankly, our democracy is on the ballot because this is not simply an election about right versus left. This is an election about right versus wrong. I worked at DOJ for 13 years. A president does not tell the Justice Department who and who not to prosecute. That is wrong. The President of the United States should not believe the former chief of the KGB over our intelligence community. We shouldn't rip children from parents. This is about all those critical issues of healthcare, but it's also about who we are as a nation.
So
our
you want to put
democracy's
President
on
Trump
the ballot.
on the ballot, then?
Well, we're fighting for all the things that Democrats care about, and that includes our democracy. And this president has undermined basic principles of our democracy. Presidents should unite. They shouldn't divide.
But when you mention President Trump himself, I mean, this is one of the questions here. You know, are you antagonizing or energizing voters when you put not just President Trump, but President Obama, who was out on the campaign trail this week and broke precedent? The White House hit him for that, for invoking President Trump's name. This is sort of one of those unwritten rules that you don't slam your successor. Is this a risky strategy to be engaging like that? Oh,
I welcome President Obama on the campaign trail because he's fighting for the issues that people care about.
But attacking President Trump by name.
Well, our health care is on the ballot, and our democracy as we know it is on the ballot. You look at what's gone on in this country, and you see a president that I worked under Republican and Democratic presidents at the Justice Department. You see the unmitigated attacks, the attempts to delegitimize the press, the attempts to do things that should never be done. I thought Canada was our ally, and it appears that they are our fiercest adversary. The world is upside down, and our democracy is indeed on the ballot. And what we're doing is we're fighting for health care. We're fighting to make sure that if you have a pre-existing condition, you can retain your health care coverage. We're fighting to make sure that a worker can join a union and organize and get good wages. Those are the things we're fighting for, and that's what Americans want in their leadership.
You have the challenge of messaging against what are positive economic indicators right now. And when you look at CBS polling in the competitive districts that really matter for you to flip, the majority of Americans feel positively about the economic direction of the country, either going from very good, 26%, to somewhat good, 45%. How do you push back against that? Isn't what happens at someone's kitchen table going to dominate how they vote?
Oh, it's very important. And if you are very, very wealthy in this country, the economy is doing great. But if you're everybody else, the economy is not doing so great. Corporate profits are soaring and wages are flat. People's health care is at risk because the president has destabilized the Affordable Care Act. The cost of prescription drugs are skyrocketing. So if you have $1 more in your pocket, but the gasoline has gone up 50 cents and your cost of prescription drugs have gone up immensely because they're not taking on the industry, and your cost of health care has gone up, you're not even treading water. And that's the reality for millions of people, including the Harley workers in Missouri who are about to lose their job.
Wages did go up in August at the fastest pace since the recession, but I do want to ask you about the direction of the party in terms of identity. You have said Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has been this sort of rock star in many ways since she won in New York a few months ago, you've called her the future of the party. Is that a sign that more people within the Democratic Party need to tack left? Is that the identity, to go more progressive?
What I have said is Connor Lamb is the future of the party. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the future of the party. Doug Jones is the future of the party. We have a party that reflects America in every zip code. We have a party that's fighting for health care. We have a party that's fighting for fair wages. We have a party that's fighting for a democracy that works for everyone, not just a few at the top. And your question about wages, it's important for your listeners to understand that real wage growth is what it's about. If wages go up by $1 and your cost of living goes up by $1.50, you're not better off. And that's the problem with this economy. If this president would take on the pharmaceutical industry, we could do something about it. And this is indeed, we got 58 days till the weekend, and the most important thing we can do is vote. And one of the things we're doing is making sure we get the vote out everywhere. And we're actually working next week to call on businesses to give 2 hours of paid leave for people so that they can get out there and vote. I'm going to ask Chair McDaniel to join us in that, because we should have this debate, and then we should make sure that every eligible person can get out there and vote.
We got to leave it there. Thank you very much. And we'll bring out here Republican Chair Ronna McDaniel next.
Always a pleasure.
And we are back with the head of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Good to be with you. And I know yesterday you were in New York. I have to ask you about this. You were alongside OMB Director Mick Mulvaney when he was caught on tape, obtained by the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, saying, "You may hate the president, and there's a lot of people who do, but they certainly like the way the country's going. And when it comes to voters, you may have to subtract from the equation how they feel about the president, and then the numbers go up dramatically." Do you think Republicans would fare better if President Trump was not so dominant in this race?
The president has a 90% approval rating among Republicans. It's one of the highest in history for a president from his own party. And we have seen on the ground, as we bring the president into these races, like Montana, where he was this week, the candidates' numbers rise. We saw it with Matt Rosendale. We saw it in Ohio when Balderson was in a very tough race. We brought the president into Delaware County, and we saw him help propel that election day vote to victory. So the president is a great asset for us. And remember, in the midterms, it's the party that's turning out their base. We have to turn out our base first. And with the president with this type of approval rating, and with these results, with a 3.9% unemployment, with 4 million jobs coming back to this country, all the good things that people are feeling, as you mentioned earlier, wage increases of 2.9%. People are feeling good about where they are, and the president is a great asset for us.
So is Mick Mulvaney flat out wrong?
I didn't hear him say that. I was there. You know, he was talking about the president being a decisive leader. He talked about his memory. He talked about working for him. I think he was just making the point that maybe if you don't like a candidate, or you don't necessarily agree with them on everything, the results in this instance speak for themselves, and that you can't deny. And Democrats are going to try and make it about the president. They're going to try and make it about personality, but the results don't lie coming out of this administration. We are a better country. We are better off than we were 2 years ago, and everyone around the country is feeling that. And that is because of this president.
There was a recording that the Journal and the New York Times both had there, also saying that Mick Mulvaney said there's a very real possibility that Senator Ted Cruz may lose his race in Texas.
Yeah, he
Are you
said,
gonna lose Texas?
No, he said it's important to be likable. We're not going to lose Texas. Yeah, he said it's important to be likable. I'm going to make this point. I don't think it's likely. You could have Texas, you could have Florida in the play. He was talking to the candidates we had in the room about the importance of being likable. That is important, but we are not going to lose Texas. Anybody who watched Ted Cruz this week in these judiciary hearings with Judge Kavanaugh, hearing him talk about the importance of rule of law, hearing him talk about the importance of what Judge Kavanaugh would bring to the bench, caring about the Constitution, knows that Ted Cruz is an excellent representative for Texas, and he is going to win that seat.
And likable? No,
and likable. I think he's very likable.
I'm just kidding. Typically when we look at midterm races, the president's party often loses seats. I mean, you've got some exceptions, 98, 2002. Will Republicans be able to hold control of the House? How certain are you?
So first of all, we know the historical trends. 30 seats lost in that first midterm when you hold the White House. Obama lost 60 seats. And usually you lose seats in the Senate too. So the Senate map we are talking about picking up seats, which is unprecedented in a midterm of a first term president. So that's something that everyone should be looking at. One, to any seat. If we pick up one seat, that will be defying history. On the House, we have a lot of seats in the margin. Absolutely, we've had an unprecedented amount of retirements, and that has made it harder in some of these swing districts. But right now, I say it's 50-50. We are out every day working. The RNC has raised to date $250 million. We've put 549 staff on the ground. We've trained 20,000 field organizers. That's 4 times more than we did in 2016. So our infrastructure to turn out our vote, to engage with our voters, to talk to them about these results is the best it has ever been in the midterms. Now, candidates matter, and that's going to be different in every single race. And we need these candidates to talk about their local issues, go out there. They have to work as hard as they've ever worked. Candidates who think that they're in safe districts, they're going to have to give everything, and we're going to be there backing it up at the RNC.
I know you said it's going to come down to the base in many ways, but a lot of traditional Republicans are troubled by some of the president's policies, particularly on trade, tariffs, going against very traditional conservative values. How do you reconcile that?
Well, first of all, the president has done things that have been traditional Republican policies that we've campaigned on for years. Deregulation, cutting taxes, strengthening our military, taking care of our veterans. And a lot of those things have spurred this economic growth, despite what President Obama is trying now to take credit for. But when it comes to the tariffs, the president has said he is for free trade. You saw that when he talked to the president of the European Union. He has said, we don't want tariffs at all. But when we are in a position of power, as our country is economically, and we are on the rise, he is going to say to countries like China, you are not going to take advantage of the United States anymore. And he is negotiating from a position of strength. Because when we're not in this position, we won't be able to fight the $500 billion deficit that we continually deal.
For now.
He's making progress, and he's fighting for Americans, and he's fighting for American jobs, and that's why he's so popular in my state of Michigan. I see it all over the country. People who were forgotten under the last administration feel like they have a president who's listening and caring about them, and the proof is in the results.
Ronna, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in a moment with our panel. We're back now with our panel. Amy Walter is national editor of the Cook Political Report and co-host of WNYC's The Takeaway. David Nakamura covers the White House for The Washington Post. Mark Leibovich is chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine and is out with a brand new book, Big Game, The NFL in Dangerous Times. And Rachel Bade covers Congress for Politico. She is also a CNN political analyst. Rachel, I'll start off with you. We were just forecasting the races here. Is Ted Cruz going to win in Texas? Are these seats something that you heard both party leaders predict accurately?
You know, it's Texas. Come on. Ted Cruz is likely going to win, of course, but this shows the energy on the left right now, and that is Democrats are turning out. They're energized, and they could really pose a threat, particularly in the House, though. And I think it was interesting, you know, McDaniel mentioned 50-50, and that she thought, it's about 50-50 chance that they keep the House. From Capitol Hill, I've heard a little bit of a change in tone in the past couple of weeks where some Republicans actually think the House is gone. And a lot of it has to do with the noise that's going on. You know, they have a story to tell. There was a great jobs report that came out Friday, record wage increases since 2009, and they want to talk about the economy. But everyone right now is focused on what's going on, the drama, the scandal in the White House, the president hitting back, the Russia investigation. And that is really drowning out the Republican message right now, and it's a big problem for them.
Amy, is that also what you're seeing?
Yeah, you know, the energy is really the key part of this. The president is very good at ginning up his base and going out and making sure that, as the RNC chairwoman said, he's got an 88-90% approval rating with his party. But when he fires up his base, he fires up the other side, and in fact fires them up almost to a degree that, actually not almost, to a degree that's larger than the people who like him. When you look at the approval rating of the president, those who say they strongly disapprove him have consistently been bigger than the people who strongly approve of him. So the intensity on the other side is really the big challenge for the Republicans.
Is putting President Obama on the campaign trail a good strategy?
You know, the strategy of putting the president on the trail is to help get those people who traditionally don't turn out in midterm elections, especially young people, to come out and vote for Democrats. That turns what is right now building as a wave for Democrats. If young people also turn out, that's a tsunami. The other thing that I think is fascinating about watching this president with President Obama, both of them are trying to do the thing that is very difficult for presidents to do in a midterm, which is to say, I want that coalition that turned out for me in the presidential year, in Obama's case, young people, people of color, in Trump's case, the rural, small-town America. I know you came out and voted for me, but now you got to come out and vote for these members of Congress, right? It's a sign that you respect me if you come and vote in the midterms. It's a very difficult thing to do, especially since Trump got elected in many ways by running against the very people that he's saying, please now vote for to come back to office.
You even saw it in Trump's rally in Montana just this past week, where one of his arguments is now a vote for Republican members in Congress or else I face impeachment. And yes, he sort of means, yes, okay, some of the progress we've made on the economy and other things, but really it's about him.
Right. I mean, I do think there are 2 points. One is, I mean, we've seen over and over again in these special elections that support for President Trump doesn't necessarily translate into turnout for Republicans down ballot. But also, I mean, yes, his support among Republicans is sky high, but the Republican Party has shrunk considerably since he has taken office. I mean, these numbers, I mean, many of them are in that 55, 60% range of disapproval. Some of them are coming from former Republicans who are no longer reflected in that sample. So I think it's an interesting, I mean, especially for a general election campaign, I think that's probably the more, prominent
Yeah,
number,
and the real fascinating thing about this campaign is the race for the Senate and the House are taking place in 2 very different Americas. Mm-hmm. The race for the Senate is through red rural America in states like Montana, North Dakota, and West Virginia. The battle for the House runs through suburban America. And in one part of America, they really like Trump. In the other part, they really don't.
Where he's been campaigning right now, just North Dakota and Montana just this past week.
Mark, I want to ask you, to Rachel's point, some of the scandal in Washington sometimes overshadows the messaging that the parties would rather have heard. With the decision for the vice president, for cabinet members to come out this week against an anonymous, self-described Trump administration official and Bob Woodward, did they elevate the story and make the problem bigger, or did they help themselves by engaging like this?
I think they elevated it. I don't think there's any question they elevated it because, first of all, the number of days between now and the election in which, the core story about the economy, which is what Republicans clearly want to be talking about, is not being told. I mean, this is another basically wasted week if you want to keep it neutral here. So, no, I mean, I don't know if they could have ignored it. I mean, I don't know if they had a choice here, but we've seen over and over again that this White House has a knack for drumming up news that has nothing to do with the economy, nothing to do with things that the Republicans would rather they talk about.
Speaking of that op-ed, it feels like at least Republicans on Capitol Hill feel like this was totally counterproductive. They have been trying to bring the president to their side on things like averting a shutdown right before the election, striking trade deals, not blowing up NAFTA completely, Russia, NATO, and right now, the president has a reason to be paranoid, at least, that's what he's telling himself. There's people in his administration who are writing these op-eds saying that they are trying to basically rein him in. He's not going to trust anyone. So this is counterproductive for Republicans, another big problem for them.
It's survival instincts for his aides to come out and say that. The president does want them to come out fighting on his behalf. Right. He himself is the one who escalates these controversies the most dramatically. And he did it again this week on Twitter, on public statements on Air Force One in the middle of this campaign trip, talking about his own competence, saying, he could speak for hours without notes to say how competent he is. I mean, he's trying to defend himself, and he wants to see his aides out there doing the same thing.
David, you had some unusual warnings from the White House, from the State Department, elsewhere about what would happen in Syria if you saw this offensive in Idlib. We know the bombing is underway. It seems those warnings are being dismissed by Russia and the Assad regime. What is happening here? Why aren't the Trump warnings being heeded?
Yes, well, I mean, the president has sort of signaled both ways on Syria in his time. And, I think that he's someone who said that he's wanted to withdraw. He's also said someone who's sent missiles into Syria. I think, there's now reports that said he's committed now to a longer term strategy, and it's not going to be simple. So, his relationship with the, malign actors in that country have not, he hasn't been that clear with exactly what he's demanding.
And what should we read into the fact that in North Korea during the military parades today, they didn't include intercontinental ballistic missiles. Are we overreading the pageantry, or is that
I
significant?
think you're seeing a sign probably from Kim Jong-un. I mean, he was there with a top-level Chinese official that's already frustrating the White House, China's role with North Korea, maybe not putting as much pressure on them as he'd like to get serious about denuclearization. But I think Kim Jong-un is reading the signs that President Trump canceled this trip of his Secretary of State to Pyongyang, saying there's not enough progress. They don't want to inflame him unnecessarily. So I think it is a sign that Kim is trying to put these things back on track. However, I think analysts are right to say that we haven't seen any real progress on the denuclearization. And the more time goes by, U.S. intelligence agencies are saying North Korea is not denuclearizing. They're not ramping it down. In fact, behind the scenes, they're taking efforts to conceal what they have and continue to move forward with the program.
Mark, you just wrote this book about the NFL. Going from one swamp to the other.
Yes,
you
exactly.
compare them in the book. But this week, just even this morning, you have President Trump tweeting about football. Why is this such a useful political tool for him?
Well, I mean, look, there's the old saying that football, the NFL owns a day of the week. That would be Sunday, right? And what I found initially, just from running, again, trading swamps, as you said, is that politics keeps infringing. This week being a perfect object lesson of my football book is out and we're talking about politics. President Trump obviously loves this issue. He has, a lot of personal resentment towards the NFL. He thinks because he's wanted to own a team for about 4 decades, and the most exclusive club, Billionaire Boys Club, the NFL owners want no part of him.
So for you, that's what it is. It's not about patriotism and the anthem and the
It's that too. It is absolutely that too. I mean, for my book, I wanted to look into what that world looks like. It's a very mysterious world. I don't think most people know what goes into running the National Football League. In President Trump's case, this is a culture war grenade. He feels that this is a winning issue. The protests are something that he feels the polls are on his side with, which it would seem it is. And he also gets to be in the middle of the great spectacle of American life, which is football and politics at the same time.
Nike also thought it was a winning issue, apparently.
Apparently, no. I mean, what Nike has done and what Donald Trump has done and what Colin Kaepernick have done is they have sort of filled the vacuum of leadership inside the NFL. And the NFL has just basically chosen to punt. Good to know. I didn't even do that on purpose. Totally didn't do that on purpose. On this issue, they're still kind of doddering around. No one knows what to do. There's no policy. And so you have these other entities filling the vacuum.
Rachel, who was the 2020 candidate trying out in these Kavanaugh hearings this week?
Who? Which one? Yes, the focus was supposed to be on Kavanaugh. It became an audition for 2020. You had Kamala Harris from California, potentially running in 2020. She waited about 10 seconds to interrupt the hearing when they first started, when Grassley basically gavelled them in, saying, we can't have this hearing. We don't have all the documents on Kavanaugh. It is not right. We don't know what he's really going to do as a Supreme Court justice until we get these documents. Mm-hmm. That was obviously followed up by Cory Booker, who is also a potential candidate in 2020, in his Spartacus moment where he said, I'm going to release a whole bunch of confidential information that the Senate panel didn't want to release. Right. Of course, some of those had already been released, so he kind of looked a little silly in that moment.
A bit of a kerfluffle.
But on that, some of them had not been.
We're out of time going through this.
We keep going forever.
We have to wrap you on the filibuster. We will be right back. Thanks for watching. I won't be here next week. I'll be taking some time with a new member of my family, but John Dickerson and the Face Nation team will be here.